Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's Better on Draft.
Welcome, everybody. Episode 271, Better on Draft Podcast. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Let's get the show on the road. As you all know, the Lions did not do good last week, so I am still staying sober until the Detroit Lions win a game. You can check out the sadness over at our TikTok. That's at Better on Draft, but I'm drinking a Well-Being Intentional IPA. And I will follow it up with a Well-Being Hellraiser Dark Amber, but I got a few co-hosts. Wendy, what's going on, and what are you drinking?
Well, I am just received the beer from my trip to Colorado here. So I picked a Greeley Night, and I am drinking a WeldWorks Secret Diversions. It is their, I don't have my glasses on, sorry. The Triple India Pale Ale brewed with Citra. Oh my goodness, that's horrible. With a bunch of different hops. It was in their mix.
IPAs usually are horrible.
It's horrible that I can't read it. That's bad. It is one of the specials that were in their mix pack with Casey Brewing and Cerebral. It looks like. Again, I didn't wear my glasses. And then I also got a Wiley Roots PB&B King. It is their Imperial Pastry Stout with banana, peanut butter, and marshmallow, which it's delicious. That was the sleeper brewery of our trip, Wiley Roots. We had no idea what they were. People kept recommending them. They were fantastic.
Well, I am sure we will talk about it during the news segment, which will follow this live if you're listening live, 7 p.m. Eastern, Fridays, betterondraft.tv or facebook.com/betterondraft. Robert, what are you drinking?
I am currently drinking from Eastern Market Brewing Company from their Halloween series, a 5-layer chocolate bar stout. Because apparently, I don't know if it's today or yesterday, it was International Stouts Day, because, you know, every day has to be some international day. But it's stout with caramel chocolate, pretzel, peanut butter, and milk sugar. I also cracked open a peanut butter marshmallow gorilla juice, because apparently, you know, I just feel like just going down a complete rabbit hole with things that are 18%. It's a barrel-aged imperial stout with peanut butter, marshmallow, and whole vanilla bean.
Well, you ain't got to drive anywhere. Dan, what are you drinking?
And yeah, International Stout Day was yesterday. I'm going a good fun route, mixing everything. I got the good old vodka soda going on, and I've got a Backwoods Bastard to wash it down.
All right. Well, if you guys look at the title, you'll know who our guest is, but we will let him introduce himself and tell us what he does for Summit Brewing.
Okay then. I don't see a title on my screen, but I'm Mark Stutrud. I'm the founder of Summit Brewing Company and the chief knucklehead there. This is our 35th year.
35th year. What are you drinking?
I'm just having a classic extra pale ale.
The EPA. I wanted to start off the conversation and talk about, you know, being 35 years within the industry. If anyone were to listen to any of your older interviews or read up about you, a lot of things that you talk about is true to style and the culture of beer. My question to you is, what is your philosophy when it comes to brewing new beers, and how does a beer finally get from your brain into a glass at the brewery?
Boy, how many questions is that?
I think just two. What's your philosophy in brewing, and how does it get to the glass?
All right. Well, to be perfectly honest, I started this brewery back in 1986 to really reincorporate true beer culture in our drinking society. You know, I mean, through Prohibition, and after Prohibition, there was this huge focus on consolidation of breweries. And in the U.S., it was all of these bigger breweries focused on a linear style of beer, which is a great light American lager, as we all know. And I'm one of those brewers that I don't go around kicking the big brewers in their ass trying to sell a case of beer, criticizing them. All of these big breweries actually created an opportunity, a niche, to reintroduce traditional classical styles. That was our focus back in '86. And today it's still the same. At the same time, although I love it because, there's some brewers that I've known over the past 5 to 10 years, and they look at me and they say, "Oh yeah, Stutrud, you're an old fart. You've been around for a long time. You're so consistent, traditional, and classical." And I look at them and I say, "Thanks for paying attention, because that's who we are." It's, we don't experiment on our customers, for one, but we do have a lot of fun. And for example, 7 years ago, we had the Unchained Series, which was a brewer-driven program. And we did this for about 6 years, and we gave it up 7 years ago. This is another point of where we were, again, pioneers and way ahead of the curve, where 3 times a year, one of our brewers was totally responsible for not only selecting a style of beer to introduce to the market, they were responsible for procuring all of the raw ingredients, selecting the yeast strain. They had their name on the label, and it was a beautiful thing. And the thing that drove my CFO crazy is that there were no budget constraints. I mean, we made beer that was terribly expensive, and we made it affordable to the folks in this area. So, we did a lot of different innovative things, but today, to be honest, we're focused on our core brand, our core market, but we have fun in between things. So, we're one of the few regional breweries in the country that still has a strong flagship. It's unbelievable that after 35 years, Extra Pale Ale in our territory continues to set a standard and a benchmark for flavor profile. So, I've got a lot of colleagues that, they like to do different things every week. That's their business plan. It's not ours. And so we're focused on, having another generation that really hasn't been confronted with the beer that we produce today, which is totally solid.
Nice. I kind of wanted to
question. Go ahead, Robo.
Oh no, that's sorry. I was gonna go into territory a little bit later. I'm gonna save that one for a bit, but I kind of want to go back a little bit further because I was listening to some other podcasts, and we tend to talk to brewers about how they got into beer, and there's always a thing that every brewery and every brewer kind of has in common, that it started with drinking a beer and their fascination of how beer was made, and then building from there. But the part I was kind of interested in was the fact that you kind of started like your overall life career with a degree in social work. And I'm curious how that led to, from social work to, doing family therapy, to working with children in hospitals, to then move on to then decide, hey, I'm going to pick up and go to the Twin Cities and start making beer.
So you're wondering about that foundation, huh?
Yeah. A little bit.
The other part that you didn't include is that I specialized in addiction.
Yes, I did. I did see something. I did hear about there was a chemical dependency. Yes.
I'll remind you.
Yes, I appreciate that.
So it's like when people look at me and say, Starrroot, how the hell did you go full circle, right? So
yeah,
the reality was back in the early 80s, I was working at a large metropolitan hospital, inpatient treatment programs for adolescents and young adults, and I was stuck in middle management. Mm-hmm. And being stuck in middle management means that you have a boatload of responsibility, but no authority.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of Scandinavian DNA, which means I've got some huge control issues. It drove me crazy. So literally, I was looking at what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I thought about going into private practice. I thought about medical school. But the fact that I was producing and, brewing at home imperial stouts and pilsners and a number of other things that weren't available commercially, that led me to doing some research on what was going on in 1982 and 1983. So that motivation opened up the opportunity to meet some of the earlier pioneers in this industry. The Widmer brothers, Ken Grossman. Mm-hmm. I spent weeks with Bill Newman. People don't talk about the William S. Newman Brewing Company in Albany, New York. Going back to early 1980, here's this Anglophile that is producing cask-conditioned beers in Albany, New York. And so I had, some serious things going on. But it just turned out that I got fired from the hospital. So I thought, okay, I'm going to throw myself into this thing. Did market research, went to brewing school in Chicago at Siebel, had two master brewers as personal mentors, because back in 1985, if you're going to compete on the street, you had to have your shit together. Quality. Yeah. I didn't care about if somebody said, oh, God, I can't stand this shit when they drink it. Mm-hmm. But the last thing I wanted them to say is that, boy, that beer is substandard. So that was a deep value for us because we were competing head on. This is at a time when in Minnesota, the largest imported sales of a brand was Moosehead.
Oh.
Even though I live in St. Paul, which has kind of got this Irish heritage, at that time when I was doing market research, there was only about a half a dozen places that had Guinness on draft. This is how homogeneous and linear beer was back then. And, so it's interesting to compare and contrast my experience with someone who opened up a brewery 10 years ago.
Right. Well, and I think for being in business for 35 years and being able to put out that consistency year after year for this long is truly a testament to, the quality that you put into your product, which actually leads me to the next thing I was going to bring up, which kind of now fast forwarding to this past year, where Summit became the official craft beer and hometown craft beer of the Minnesota Twins. Congratulations on that. And, having to obviously have your own, I think it's like a patio space that you have there at Target Field, with essentially, the chance to serve thousands at every home game there. How has this year gone? And is there anything that you'd like to do differently in the stadium in the next season?
Well, we're not going to do anything differently. We're just starting.
Mm-hmm.
The ink wasn't dry on the contract before opening day. We took a long time, but our relationship with the Twins, again, goes back to our connection with that organization. We've always, since Target Field has been open, we've had our beer there. We really wanted to step it up. And literally what happened was, Budweiser really had a lock on Target Field. And when Budweiser didn't exercise their first right of refusal for the next 3-year cycle of contracts, the Twins organization took steps back and they said, this gives us an opportunity to talk to a domestic brewer, a craft brewer, and import a seltzer and spirits. And they really leveraged that position for themselves. And I've known Dave St. Peter, the president of the Twins, for many years. And believe me, we were blessed that Dave called us first and said, we want you guys at Target Field as our craft beer. Now, and then this is a lesson, I guess. I don't know how many craft brewers follow your pod and all of this stuff, but, damn it, this business is still relationship based.
Yeah.
It's not like, here, I've reinvented an IPA and this will smack everybody's head upside down and we'll sell volumes of this stuff. You still have to make these connections. And so brand equity and the fact that we're trustworthy and reliable, people get what they expect when they're going to be laying down $6 to $10 for a beer. It's a huge responsibility. And this is something that has been pretty cool. So consequently, when the ink was drying on the contract, we didn't have any point of sale to speak of. We took over the space that Goose Island had. And a lot of people would say, well, why do we have Goose Island in Minneapolis when they should be in Chicago? We're just going to really ramp this up, and this is going to be a long-term relationship moving forward.
Yeah, I think that is going to be cool. Then the last one I was going to throw out there, which, earlier you were talking about territory. I feel like I already know where the answer to this question is going to be, so I'm going to try and reframe this a little bit. So basically from what I saw is that your distribution footprint right now is 5 states, being obviously Minnesota, then North and South Dakota, and Wisconsin and Iowa. Now, back in 2017, Summit had left 6 states at that time, which that was Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Nebraska, and unfortunately us here in Michigan. I know that, during those, when you do that and take that away, there's obviously a good reason to do that. And in falling into obviously a situation that was not 7 months later, we're having to lay off your workers as well. I guess kind of looking at where the landscape is today from, 2020, the COVID year, to 2021, the still COVID year, and going into 2022. You said that your focus is still, on the region, but if the region weren't a factor, would you like to be further out and expand the footprint, or would you feel better to have the people, I guess, essentially come to you?
Ken, why didn't you warn me that Robert was going to just cut me to the core here? I mean, I'm going to just like settle back.
I'm pretty sure at the beginning, before the show started, I said, "Hey, I was going to warn you," and you're like, "No, I got everything covered."
He's like, one question he wants me to cover 4 years. Okay, all right, I'm with you.
Hey, I've been off the show for like a month, so I think I'm still trying to get my feet back in the shoes. So I'm sorry.
It's called overcompensation. So
where I live, that's people with oversized truck tires.
I'll do my day job.
Yeah. The reality is that, when the craft industry over the past 10 years really exploded. Everybody wants to support the local person. They also want to support the new person, right? The underdog, so to speak, right? And we had great sales in Columbus, Ohio. We had a salesperson in Columbus. We had 2 people in Chicago. We had people in every state that we were in when we pulled out. But financially, we weren't making it. And you've got that equation between making a profit, selling more beer, looking to the future, and the degree of the distributor's attention. And, I would not be at the scale we are today without the 3-tier system. But if a distributor is not going to embrace you and really work with you, it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
And that's the reality. And the reality is that in Columbus, we had 6 to 12 solid draft beer accounts where people loved our beer. But we did not connect in the chains. All right? Mm-hmm. And when you look at all of these chain systems off-premise, you're also at a liability if you have a smaller footprint. Because some of these chains spread over maybe 15 states or 20 or more. And if you're not really integrated with that and also have the distributor with you, you're really at a liability. So back in 2017, when we pulled out of all of these states, including Illinois, and my in-laws in Chicago are pretty pissed off because we've been in Chicago for 15 years. Well, my wife is, it's not fun putting a couple of cases of beer in the back of the car when we go see my relatives. It's like, it was a really difficult thing to do, but Illinois, again, that also had to do with changes in distributor relationships and focus. And truthfully, when you're looking at being a regional brewery today, there's been such significant consolidation on the distribution tier. You have fewer distributors, and they're collecting all of these brands, and their portfolio is terribly deep. And they look at you and say, okay, what are you going to bring for us? If you don't have people on the street, then you're going to be spending this much money, in our market to drive sales, and we'll take the order, and I'm trying to be diplomatic here, but this is the reality of the three-tier system. And this is why a lot of the breweries that are kind of chugging along, they're very locally focused. So we thought, again, our business plan is to focus on our core brands and our core market. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, when you think about it, the 5 states, Robert, that you talked about, 90% of our sales are still in Minnesota. Almost 72% of our sales are in the metro area of the Twin Cities.
Wow.
Which is crazy. And I like to, Dan and Deb Carey, they love it when they say, well, we're selling all of our beer in Wisconsin. I'm saying, well, God bless you, because you're focused. And we have the same kind of attitude that, if you don't make it at home, you're not going to be making a bunch of money shipping beer to Japan.
That's true. All right, Dan.
Yeah, so I'm actually glad you were talking about distributors and that. So this is curiosity just based on Minnesota law. Do the beer laws there make it harder or make it more restricted as far as distribution goes because of your beer? I mean, you can't sell to gas stations, you can't sell to grocery stores. Is that a restriction for breweries in your state? Do you have less opportunity to distribute versus, like, say, going to Columbus, like you were talking about?
No. I mean, what you're hinting at is that Minnesota is the last state in the nation that sells 3-2 beer.
Yeah, somehow you still have that law when even my good friends to the north, Utah, don't have that. So,
yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Well, eventually it's going to change. You've also got to remember that Volstead, the author of the Prohibition Bill, came from Granite Falls, Minnesota. I mean, he fell on his sword to do that. So there's always been this really intense conservatism when it comes to liquor laws. It's only been a handful of years, a couple of years, that liquor stores could sell and be open on a Sunday, right? And so 3-2 beer is a flashpoint that's going to come up in the next, this coming legislative session and the following one. I really can't tell you when that's going to change. It may be within 2 years. But there are a lot of, conservative approaches in this state specifically, because like back in 1987, brew pubs weren't legal in the state of Minnesota. We were open for about 11 months. I found a senator and he was a freshman senator, and he thought, well, this would be cool to allow breweries to sell a glass of beer on a retail basis. And because we were the first proponents to have a brew pub law in the state of Minnesota. It didn't even get to the Commerce Committee. It wasn't heard. Because at that time, we had 75 on-premise customers. We only did draft beer our first year, from the fall of 86 to the fall of 87. And one of my best customers, a bar restaurant, when he heard about this bill, he said, Stutrud, if you think you're going to be selling a glass of beer at your damn brewery, you can come on down and pull out all of your draft lines. And at that point in time, we had to make a pretty quick decision of where we were going to make a living. And we weren't going to be pushing a brew pub bill because we had invested a lot of money on a small production brewery. So we focused on that side of the business and moved on. 3 years later, through lobbyists and people that wanted to change the law, they said, okay, you can start a brewery, but if you're going to be selling beer on premise, you have to be like less than 2,000 barrels production a year. Something really stupid, right? So the retailers and the wholesalers were really tight. And consequently, over the time of the past 30 years, we've got kind of this mixed up laws that have been focused on individual interests. You know, it's not really, unfortunately, it doesn't have an industry focus. It was like individual breweries or whoever would approach the legislature and say, well, let's change this a little bit. So we've got this, it is a crazy situation to unravel, right? And right now, today, the retailers, the distributors have said, oh, we've made all these changes and you guys keep asking for more and more. I mean, it's totally different than Colorado or even Wisconsin, you know? So it's going to be interesting evolution.
You mentioned Wisconsin, and that's when you had brought up the customer of yours who said to tear down all your lines, it kind of hit me because it reminded me of the Wisconsin Tavern League a few years ago, who tried to force breweries who wanted to distribute to force them to sell to a sell on site, to sell to a distributor to then rebuy it back and have to have the beer leave and come back for fairness to the taverns, quote unquote fairness.
Yeah.
Given, it in the industry for 35 years, what is the changes that have happened that have allowed you to succeed for those 35 years? Because the brew laws back in the 1980s aren't going to be the same that it is today, where you're selling, I think you're 20th right now in production for craft breweries.
Yeah. I mean, we're doing like 110,000 barrels a year plus, right? So, I mean, when you look at some of these bills that say, okay, I want to sell growlers to the public when they come to the tap room, and doggone it, I'm mad that if I hit 20,000 barrels of a volume of production and sales in Minnesota, there shouldn't be a cap. Well, for me, we're at a scale of where we're focused on taking care of our retail customers. The last thing I want to do is be filling growlers in the back of the bar at our scale and then having them available to have people take it with them when they come to visit. I don't need 6-packs in our gift shop. I would much rather say, go down to the liquor store that's just like a half a block away, and you can buy our beer there. It goes back to relationships. And the amount of sales that we have on a retail basis, our Rathskeller, our beer hall, is less than 1% of our total sales. So again, it goes back to a business plan. And I understand a lot of the other breweries, smaller ones and even bigger ones, that you've got an entertainment complex and you're going to be, having 30% plus of your sales on site. That's just not our plan. So if they want to go to the legislature to help them with their own individual business plan, that's their issue. And I won't necessarily lobby for that. What I lobby for is changes in the franchise laws between brewers and distributors. That's more critical to our business than me selling growlers to somebody who wants to come by the brewery. It really is, it comes down to running a business on top of making good, solid quality beer. So sometimes I find myself in uncomfortable conversations with colleagues. And they say, I want you to jump on this bill. And I go, do you know anything about the franchise law? And they go, what's that? And then the same smaller brewers are saying, gosh, when we're talking to these distributors and we're like negotiating trading chips, like maybe we should reduce the level of the cap of whether or not a small brewery can self-distribute. I'm going, don't touch that. I would not be talking to you guys and Wendy if we had not had the opportunity to self-distribute. Back in 1986, a beer wholesaler wouldn't even have a goddamn conversation with us. We were looked at as a bunch of deviants. They're going, you're going to make what? Who's going to drink that? Right? We self-distributed our first year just out of survival. And then when we were able to carve out our business, that's when the distributors came back to get back their draft lines, right? Our second and third year was really difficult because there was no representation on their side. They just wanted to reclaim ground that they lost. And I'm just being perfectly honest about this stuff. So, when you look at a bargaining chip, I don't care what state it is, small breweries need to have the right to self-distribute to a significant degree. Historically, in Minnesota, it was 25,000. And then with all these changes and exceptions and all this stuff to what the wholesalers thought to accommodate small breweries, they actually dropped it down to 25,000 or 20,000. My opinion is that breweries should be able to self-distribute up to 100,000 if they really want to grow in the context of this consolidation. Okay, I'll shut up for a while and take a beer.
Wendy, I know you had a question for him.
I have quite a few questions, actually.
Oh dear.
So the Twin Cities business called you the Twin Cities Beer Pioneer. And my original question was actually, what do you think set you apart from others in the industry? But I think you've already done a pretty good job of answering that question in your other answers. So I want to ask that the same article mentioned that you were continuing to seek new growth opportunities. So could you give us an example of what you were looking for then, or maybe something you're still looking for?
In opportunities, you're saying?
Yep.
Future opportunities in what direction?
That's up to you.
How much time do you have, Wendy?
About 10 minutes.
Oh, damn.
No, not really 10 minutes, like 5 minutes.
Well, I have to be brutally honest. One of my biggest concerns about where the craft brewing industry is going today, and a couple of weeks ago, a close friend of mine and author, journalist, a beer fanatic, he's trained. We were talking about how beer has gone stupid, where all of a sudden we find ourselves where styles of beer, and I understand these brewers where their marketing focus and everything is, they're saying like, fuck the boundaries, right? Screw what defining the style is. This is us and all this stuff. I totally get their marketing gist. But we have a lot of beer drinkers that are new. And yet, after 35 years, they don't even know what classical styles are. So again, going back to our core and why we started this brewery is to reincorporate classical styles of beer. And then within those definition of styles, you can be individualistic. There's no question. But, when I'm looking at some of the folks that are in the industry, they have no technical training. I totally understand the idea of having a dream in your garage and wanting to go pro. But when you experiment on customers, that's bullshit. It truly is. And I know of breweries, and all of you guys do as well, that, oh gosh, this batch kind of went off, so we'll call it a sour. Now, I'm not going to criticize someone who has a small scale brewery. 95% of their income comes from their tap room. They can do beer du jour every damn day of the week. And that can be their business plan. I'm comfortable with that. But if they're putting beer in a can or a bottle and it explodes on a retail shelf or ruptures pallets of beer at wholesalers, that's inexcusable. And when the Brewers Association put out a publication about 5 years ago saying, here's a book that you should buy, 101 ways to avoid exploding cans, that's inexcusable for this industry. This is why you go to brewing school. It's like these knuckleheads. I mean, down the street, got this lawyer, made a bunch of money. He's a home brewer. Money is no object. He got a couple of blue ribbons at the state fair. And he goes, Mark, I hear that you're a guy that I should talk to get into this industry. I go, okay, so what's your business plan? He goes, I'm not only going to make the best goddamn beer in the world, but I'm going to change all these restrictive legislative laws and I'm going to push forward. And I look at him and say, hey, Jack, who's going to make the beer? Who's going to put it in a package to get it to distributors, then to retail customers? And he goes, well, I am. And I said, well, did you go to brewing school? What's your experience? What's your depth? He goes, no, I got these ribbons. Everybody loves my beer. And I look at the guy and I go, Jack, what would you say if I went down the street, rented a storefront, hung out a shingle, and practiced law without a license? And he goes, oh no, that's different. And I go, bullshit. I mean, the level of amateurs going forward can erode the profession of brewing. And this truly is at the core of what is going to really ramp up in the next few years. I'm not criticizing people who want to create a new experience for beer drinkers. But doggone it, when you put the beer in a can or keg or bottle and you put it through the distribution system, we're talking about food manufacturing practices. And that's a huge responsibility that's not being talked about. I'll get off my ramp here.
No. We love what you're saying. We love to hear what you say because we think, one, everyone has an opinion on the industry. And obviously we have a podcast because of it. Everyone wants to talk about it. Everyone wants to promote. And if we were just to hear the exact same thing over and over and over again, it'd be boring. We wouldn't have fans. So bringing in your perspective is something we truly appreciate. And a lot of us are really happy for this answer just because it's something we don't hear very often. And I think it's something that we need to hear a little bit more often. But I want to, we promised a certain time frame and we like to keep it short. So we're going to be ending the show here soon. Each of us is going to have a final question for you. They're not going to be long-winded asking you to cover 30 years of history. They're short, fun ways to kind of end the show. So we're going to start with Robert and work our way around.
Oh, thanks for starting with Robert.
I'm going to make it quick. I'm basically going to pull this one out of our other hosts and Nick's bag of tricks. Favorite, I guess, guilty pleasure beer that is in your fridge that is not Summit, basically like a macro that you kind of fall back to whenever you feel like just having a beer.
Oh, damn. The only beer in my fridge today is Keller Pils from the brewery. I'll drink other beers with the neighbors down the alley. But guilty pleasure, it's, there's a beautiful little brewery here in Minneapolis, a suburb called Steel Toe. I appreciate those guys. They really work hard. They do like 3,500 barrels a year. They know what they do. It's a lifestyle. And it's not a point of, I would say, arrogance or other stuff. And I've been longtime friends with Ted and Jody Marty at Shell's. I met the folks at Shell's, which is the oldest brewery in Minnesota and the second oldest brewery in the country, as far as being family owned. But what I do is I like to get out of Minnesota and explore other folks. I've known Larry Bell for years. So, when I have a Two-Hearted, I just kind of smile and think of him. Same damn thing with Dan and Deb Carey. At New Glarus, I may not drink Spotted Cow. I'll check out their Pilsner. I'll do other things. The fact that I've got so many relationships with a lot of brewers over 35 years, that makes it tough to answer that question.
That's fair. Although interview with New Glarus was definitely one of my was definitely a good highlight from last year.
Dan is a serious son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
I know. And again, he's every once in a while when people talk to me about brewers, they say, I have a lot of colleagues, but I have fewer peers. Dan carries a peer of mine.
Nice.
Daniel.
All right, Daniel.
All right, so this will be kind of fun. So you have to take on Ken here in a beer chugging contest, and you get to pick the beers. What beer are you going to choose, and what beer are you going to give him of yours? Both of them have to be your beers. What are you going to pick so you beat him in this chug off?
Say that again, Dan. I'm sorry.
So, yeah, no worries. You're going to have a beer chugging contest against Ken here. And you get to pick the beers. So which beer are you picking for yourself, and which beer are you picking for Ken to make sure you win?
What's the wager?
Whatever you want it to be.
I'll put up this empty can, and you can put up your brewery.
Jeez.
So
I'll make sure to lose because I don't want that kind of responsibility.
No responsibility. How about the debt? I mean, the banker still has an ankle bracelet on me, for crying out loud. Come on now. Man, that's a hell of a question. A beer chugging contest.
After what you said, this is assuming you want to win. Maybe you want Ken to win this.
Well,
free and clear.
Yeah, I would probably stick with a Keller Pils, but I would just feed Ken a bunch of Maybach, which clocks in at about 7.2.
Couldn't you just give me your alt beer? I know you got an alt beer over there.
Yeah,
at least let me enjoy it.
I know, that's a beauty too. Yeah. And the Oktoberfest, it's all gone, so I can't ship you any.
Well, Wendy, what's your final question here?
Well, you mentioned liking to be able to go and visit other breweries, and I too am a travel fanatic. I like to at least a couple times a year go to other states to try their beer. And my question is, if I were to come to Minnesota, what would stand out about your brewery to make me want to come there?
Oh, well, we were on University Avenue in St. Paul for 12 years and 7,500 square feet. And we bought a brew house that was fabricated in 1938, shipped it over from Germany. And we were one of just a couple of breweries that, back in the day, we didn't cobble dairy tanks and all this stuff and retrofit because, there weren't all of these manufacturers back then that there are today. So we worked with a functioning antique, and then back when we outgrew our space, I went to Bavaria in 1994 and looked at a copper brew house that was built in 1971 in a brewery that closed outside of Nuremberg, and spent 6 weeks supervising a bunch of Germans, and I'm good at restaurant German. And we shipped 12 truckloads of equipment to St. Paul to build the new brewery that we're currently in today. And so we're in, that was in 1998. So when you come to Summit, you not only look at a very traditional brew house, but you also look at a piece of Germany that was in this small village of Ansbach. And along with that, all of our beers are naturally carbonated. We don't do any CO2 injection. All of our fermentation vessels are pressure vessels, and we capture the CO2 toward the end of the fermentation time. We're very rare as far as that's concerned. And we believe it gives a much better flavor profile and sensory experience compared to breweries, big or small. So even though we get criticized for being too big, we are very artisan and traditional. And Damian McCann, who's in charge of the brewing team today, I'm really blessed with the crew that I have. I mean, Damian has been with me for 18 years. He's an Irish native. He has his master's degree in brewing and distilling with honors from Heriot Watt in Edinburgh, Scotland. And we have some very, very deep training and very deep quality control because, to be honest, our growth in the future is going to come at the expense of the big boys. You know, I don't really focus on competing with all the little guys that want to kick me in the ass for being the Budweiser of Minnesota, right? So we're focused on pulling business away from the bigger brewers, and we have to have our shit together, and we got to make damn sure that we put out quality beer.
All right, my final question for you is very, very simple. Based on everybody's favorite drinking games, I want to know, what is your favorite drinking sport? So like billiards, darts, bowling, something that, you know, everyone usually says they're much better at after a few drinks. Snooker.
I have a 6 by 12 foot ocean table in my basement. I probably could have set my computer up down there. I'm still mediocre. I got to improve. But the coolest thing going back is that the Rolling Stones played on this table back in 1994.
That is very
Nice.
cool.
That is cool.
That's going to do it. Better on Draft Podcast, episode number 271. Mark Stutrud of Summit Brewing, thank you so much for joining. We appreciate it and you taking the time. Don't forget to like us on all of our social medias. That's Better on Draft on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and now TikTok. And, of course, find out what we were drinking by friending us on Untapped Bod Podcast. No matter what you think of your beer, we think it's Better on Draft. Have a good night.
Peace.
Go.